why I don't really care about people's gender identity. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and in a recent video I mentioned the YouTuber ContraPoints, who I am not super interested in talking about anymore. Totally not interested. I said my piece, and I don't even think I have much interest in having a conversation with them anymore either. But would you tell Contra to hit me up on Twitter? Kidding, but I do unfortunately need to mention something related to the gender discussion as it pertains to Contra. You see, one of the points I made, which has seemed to confuse a few people, is that I don't really care what somebody is regarding their gender, which applies to sexuality as well. Some people might wonder how I could not really care what gender or sexuality somebody might be, considering the nature of my channel. And I thought about it for a moment and then realized that some people had every reason to be confused by that statement, as that could look intellectually inconsistent, considering how many videos I have devoted to talking about things like non-binary identified people, transgenders, and gender-neutral pronouns. Thus, I need to really clarify my stance about this and what exactly I really mean when I say that I don't care about somebody's gender. Not just for my audience, but for myself, so that I have processed properly these thoughts, as I am the type of person that doesn't process my thoughts until I write them down. Basically, long story short, when I say, I don't care what gender you are, I mean that in the way that I have known countless people of all varieties. Cisgender straight men and women, cisgender gay men, lesbians, bisexuals, transgender people of both varieties, and countless people who were some strange, ambiguous mix. And not only have I known these people, I've liked a whole bunch of every type of person. Thus, I always figured I should be nice to people regardless of their gender identity, and also that if somebody was nice to them and that if everybody was nice to them like I tend to be, why would they do things like take hormones because it was trendy and then maybe regret it? Now, maybe my thought process was idealistic, but that always just had seemed to be like the best course of action to me. I've known a couple that consisted of a transgender male and a transgender woman. And they were totally nice. And when we'd hang out, we'd DJ electronic music, play video games, talk about Doctor Who, go out to pizza, and watch Justice League cartoons. Did we talk about gender and transitioning? Actually, no, because we were hanging out as friends. I've known a biologically female person who was basically socially male as far back as high school, in that this person was consistently mistaken for being a guy, even back in high school. But well into their 20s, this person refused to go on testosterone or call themselves transgender, but then eventually, in their late 20s, decided that he needed to appear male with the help of hormones due to dysphoria. And I knew him as far back as high school. Imagine that. I've known fairly well at least 3 biologically male people who never transitioned, seemingly at all, but were so extraordinarily girly that they felt that they could safely identify as genderqueer, and they preferred female pronouns, but also wouldn't get offended if people called them he, and I just didn't care because I liked these people. So I tended to call them she if they wanted, because I didn't care. All of these people and several others that I can't think of off the top of my head were people that I simply liked as individuals, and thus their gender identity became completely unimportant to me and to our friendship. And guess what? That's how they wanted it, even more than I did. Because they had grown so used to people being weirded out by their gender complexities that they were relieved to find people like myself who just didn't care and could play video games and talk about Doctor Who and Star Trek. You see, living in far leftist areas and knowing hundreds and hundreds of gay, lesbian, transgender, and gender ambiguous people for several years, like I did, I simply learned not to care much about it at all. And thus, if I had better things to think about than somebody's gender, I tended to think about those things instead. In the case of ContraPoints, the gender was vague and confusing for several reasons, and I knew perfectly well that my audience was confused as much as I was. I also found out that ContraPoints themselves doesn't actually really care all that much what people call them, apparently, as they refer to themselves as non-misgenderable in this video, which might be why this person has been so vague for so long. And do you know what? That's perfectly fine with me. I might have been slightly curious about Contra's gender identity and if this person dated men or women, just because I sometimes get curious like anybody does, but 95% of what I cared about when addressing Contra was their ideas as they related to politics, as you can tell by watching my video about them. Now, I don't really think that Contra is cool, at least not at the moment, mainly because I feel that this person encourages the unhinged paranoia coming from the Antifa crowd, which definitely does really lead to real violence in the real world, and I don't think that it is acceptable to encourage their paranoid delusions. But that's my main issue with Contra. And I made that explicitly clear in my video, and so the fact that people have gone on to harp so much on the fact that I made the choice to refer to Contra by their name, and even pursue drama with me as a result of that choice, is simply very puzzling to me. Do people have a right to ask questions about why I chose to call Contra Contra instead of calling them she? Absolutely, they more than have that right. However, if they are going to do things like that, they should stop and think about the fact that out of all of the content in that video that they could be thinking about, they chose to focus on such a minute detail, which was my choice to refer to this person by name. I think that people should ask themselves why they chose to focus on that one detail and what that says about them and their own ways of viewing gender. You see, I legitimately didn't care about what gender Contra was enough to ever focus on that as much of any sort of my grand major argument in my video. But maybe there's a possibility that the people who made a big deal about all of that do care about Contra's gender a whole bunch. I liken this kind of thing to what I called obsession racism in a video called The 3 Types of Interpersonal Racism that I made a number of months ago. In it, I argue that the people who are going around calling things racist all day are actually rather racist themselves by virtue of how preoccupied with race they are. I mean, really, you can't go around seeing the world through explicitly race-colored goggles and calling out racism wherever you see it, which is basically everywhere, and then not be considered somewhat racist, right? In the same way, you can't go around correcting people's pronoun choices constantly or questioning why somebody referred to somebody by name instead of pronouns without inspiring people to believe that you are a lot more preoccupied with people's gender identities than everybody else. Are these people who are concerned with gender identity the real transphobes? Are they total bigots, in my opinion? Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that, though I'm sure some of them are probably overcompensating for some deep insecurity around gender that they are undoubtedly projecting outward. More so, I can and should make it clear that the main point of this video is about how I feel as an individual, because people can always best speak about themselves. And what I really want, what I really want, I just wish the following, as cheesy as it sounds. I want a world back where people gender bend. Might be biologically male, but going by female pronouns. Might be biologically female, but going by male pronouns. Might change their mind, but in the end, not really care a whole bunch because that's not why we're friends. When I hung out with queer people, we had a thriving art scene. We lived in an urban center that we could actually afford. We could talk about video games and Star Trek while smoking pot and DJing drum and bass records, and if somebody made a pronoun mistake, we'd usually be having too much fun to care, as far as I remember, and that's what I miss. Somehow, almost all of the fun was stripped away from the queer scene, and there's a lot of reasons why that was that have to do with the urban meccas becoming non-affordable. But also, intersectionality and activism became more important to people than art, music, fun, and friends. I've said it once, and I will say it again. If somebody wants to be referred to by a pronoun that feels unnatural, like if it's somebody that was obviously born with a penis that wants to be called she, I will consider it if I like the person. But if they are not interesting to me, and they also prove that they'll be rude about pronoun mistakes, I'll tend to opt out of the friendship with them. I also won't be friends with people who demand gender-neutral pronouns, because I figure that those people simply want to start fights, on account of the fact that they know perfectly well that most people see them as biologically male or female, or as a transgender person. And it's as if they are just waiting for people to make mistakes. But if somebody is totally nice but politely asks for gender-neutral pronouns and will never get mad if people don't use them, what kind of jerk would I be not to at least be nice to them? I mean, granted, I probably wouldn't hang out with somebody that claims to be gender neutral, but I don't have a problem hanging out with somebody that's gender confused. And especially, I wouldn't have a problem if they are interesting. If they make good art, music, writing, theater, videos, or something like that, let's hang out, let's play video games. There's a certain gender-ambiguous person that I've known for several years, well over a decade. And this person is biologically male, but they never transitioned, though they still read almost completely female when you look at them and even when you hear them talk most of the time. It was never a choice for this person to become transgender. They were just born into an extraordinarily feminine body, despite the fact that they also have a penis, and they are both feminine acting and attracted to men. People have always been confused about what gender this person is, and I can't blame anybody for being confused. But truthfully, I never asked, "What are you?" Because they were really cool, a popular karaoke host, and a really funny person that I liked spending time with when I was so fortunate. So why would I bug them about an awkward conversation that they probably had like 500 times? I ran into this person one time when I was out on a date with a guy for the first time, and this transgenderish feminine male came into the bathroom where we were waiting in line. Being that it was the male bathroom, and being that my date apparently wasn't used to how touchy some transgender people can be, he asked the following: "So you use the men's bathroom?" I was mortified for about 2 seconds, but as it turned out, this transgenderish person had a perfect response. "I use the men's bathroom, I use the woman's bathroom, I use whatever bathroom is available that has a mirror so I can look at myself, honey." I realized at that moment something that I think a lot of people take several years to learn, which is that as much time as people spend obsessing about their gender confusion when they might suffer from dysphoria, each and every one of those people probably spends a lot more time simply trying not to think about it at all, and to instead hopefully have a bit of fun. So I think that we should help them. That's all I have to say for this video. If you like my work, please consider donating to me on PayPal or Patreon. Links in the description. Stay tuned.